Hey folks, I'm here to talk to you today about a little game, well not so little, but a game called Solomon Kane. It's all coming up right after this. Hey YouTube, this is Pack Deck, and this here is the core set for Solomon Kane. This is an expansion that I got with the Kickstarter, and I was able, basically this box was mostly empty. It was really easy to tuck inside this thing, so I'm going to put it aside for now, but there was an extra one. We'll come back to this in a minute. Solomon Kane dates back to 2018, and it was in what I call my blossoming Kickstarter stage. Basically, I discovered Kickstarter around that time, and I started backing just insane amounts of things, including Cthulhu Death May Die and stuff. And this came right around the same time. I'm having trouble remembering now what came first, but I remember being deeply troubled because I'd spent a lot of money on this, and then suddenly Cthulhu Death May Die came up, and I was really torn on which one to do, or to do both, or to spend money on one because I'd already spent money on the other. It was a lot of hand-wringing, but I'm honestly glad that I got both of them. It's by far the most expensive Kickstarter that I've done. Now, when I initially backed this, I only got the core set, which is these two boxes. And these two boxes are fairly huge. I was so excited when this finally arrived. You can only imagine, because it had run late. I think it was supposed to come out... It was supposed to come out, of course, very soon after the Kickstarter. Kickstarters almost never come out when they say they'll come out, but this one was like over a year late. And then I think COVID kind of exacerbated things. But I was lucky enough to get this back in April and get it all painted up. As I talk, I'm going to be showing you the painted miniatures of this. I don't claim to be the best painter or anything. I did almost all of this, in fact, with contrast paints. It's funny, when you have a really daunting job, like the amount of miniatures that come with a game like this, if you want them to all be painted, and that's sort of just an option that I prefer, those contrast paints really do a good job of kind of doing good enough to be like table ready and really let you power through them and work really fast. They save you a few steps. I try to be a little bit picky on my paint jobs and stuff, but I guess in my older age, it's getting harder and harder to see, and it just doesn't matter as much as it used to. So I don't go to town on them like I might say a Warhammer 40K model or something like that, where I really go in with the highlights and really, and put many shades on there. The contrast paints are great for knocking out games like this and any of those CMON games with just tons of miniatures in them and stuff. They're great for that. So as you can see, Solomon Kane comes in these two boxes. This bottom box here contains all the cards that are involved in the many different scenarios. It also holds all the scenario books. It's got a little plastic divider in there that will hold sleeved versions of all the cards, which I thought was really nice. In my opinion, the only cards you really need to sleeve are if you're going to sleeve them, and I do like to sleeve them just for peace of mind, especially with an expensive Kickstarter-only game like this. I like to sleeve the cards that you're going to be handling a lot. And this game has a fair amount of cards like that. Each of the virtues, which we'll discuss in a minute, but each of the virtues, they have a deck of cards, and they're not very many. So you're going to shuffle through them a lot. Definitely recommend you sleeve those cards. Maybe not so much on the... Now, I ended up sleeving anything that had to be shuffled. So I sleeved a lot of the event cards and things like that. What I didn't sleeve are the scenario-specific card decks. There are these like tarot cards for each scenario. And what they do is they kind of help tell the story. It's a very narrative game. So these cards kind of help tell the story, and they alter the rules slightly as you play. And because of that, they're not used a whole lot, and they're never shuffled. They're in a very specific order. So I've just left the sleeves off of them, and I put them on kind of anything else. There's been many videos made about the mechanics and how this works and stuff, so I'll probably skip straight to the opinion parts of this, which are my opinion on maybe value and how it plays and the quality of the miniatures and stuff like that. And I like to start maybe with the quality of the miniatures. I think what sets this apart from, like, if I'm going to compare it to another miniature heavy game, and I'm going to just pull out Simon as my is a company that makes games with about as many miniatures as this. Um, Mythic really went to a next level. Like, I was sort of impressed with the miniatures, at least from Rightbusters, which is another one of their projects that I backed. But I was very it was like a whole nother level when I got to these. The decorative bases, each of these bases, now I can see where the molds were kind of the same, like they'll maybe move a rock around or they'll take the same, use the same base and put a couple of different people on it, but all the bases are modeled. So there's like there's cobblestones and gravel and seashells and skulls and tree trunks and stuff like that all along the base. So most of the time in miniatures like this, like from Simon, all their bases are blank. There's nothing there. And there's something to be said for that. In fact, I'm kind of getting into the clear bases now, where you just kind of cut the feet off and you put them on little transparent bases, which I think is kind of superior to just a plastic disc. But these are really neat. They really kind of they make it more of a unified little thing, like its own little scene, all the way down to his feet and like the deer head on the. I think there's a chef with a dead fish on the floor in someone's hand or something like that. So it's a really unique approach to the miniatures. As far as the rest of the miniatures go, they did a really great job. They did that mixture where the thin parts are mixed with like a heavier PVA. I'm probably getting that term wrong, but it's a different sort of plastic that's a little more rigid. And so if it's got a long staff or something like that, they put that sort of plastic in versus the other one, so they're not, all their staffs aren't all bendy. But then the rest of it's kind of a little bit softer and more malleable. The softer, more malleable parts are better for detail, I think. And the stiffer parts, of course, will keep a more rigid shape. I didn't have hardly anything bent. I think one of the Virtues had a sword that was a little bit bent. I put it under some hot water for a little bit. Warmed it up, straightened it up, and then cooled it off real quick, and it was fine after that. So I had almost, I would say, zero problems from any of the miniatures in here. And for pre-assembled miniatures, I thought they did a really great job. Like, the assembly seems to be good, and they were a lot of fun to paint. If you ever have maybe a role-playing game that takes place in the 1500s, you'd have just a whole wealth of random people and random villagers and stuff. You could do a whole thing with this. In fact, I'd like to take all the miniatures from this and sort of convert it into a pulp alley game and play with them in a whole new way. Maybe even some of the scenarios in a whole new way. So the miniatures are great, and that's great. But how's the game itself? Well, Solomon Kane is a completely unique game, at least for me. It does a lot of things that I've never done in a board game before. And it does it really well. Let me tell you about it. So in Solomon Kane, everyone is Solomon Kane. And basically by that I mean everyone is a virtue. And they're trying to pass their influence to Solomon Kane. So it'd be kind of like a little ghost hand on your shoulder, guiding you towards this decision or that decision. So everybody collectively, it is a cooperative game. Well, there's a couple of different ways to play it. I think the intended way to play it is as a co-op. So all the Virtues, they guide Solomon Kane's decisions. They gather information for him. They help him fight. They help him talk. They help him move around. That's what the Virtues are there to do. We're just kind of watching the scene unfold and giving our influence when we can to kind of make things happen the way they need to happen. The way the Virtues work is this sort of combination of dice throws and then cards. They have these custom 6-sided dice that you throw, and those things you can use to pay for little decisions that are on your cards. You have a deck of cards, you kind of choose which ones you want, you put them on either side of your dashboard, and your dashboard's got some stuff that you can always do, and the cards are kind of like other things that the different Virtues can do. And the different Virtues can do different things, like some specialize in looking for things, and some specialize in moving around or fighting or talking to people. So there's a good variety of uses for all the different Virtues. So you roll the dice, you pay for the action, you use the cards, the ones on the sides kind of cycle through so you get different things all the time that you can do. And in that sense, there's sort of this traditional a traditional board game kind of thing. Roll the dice, pay for actions, do stuff. But I've never had a game where we're all basically one character kind of making their way through the story. And I've never seen a game that's so story oriented. Like this is a very, very narrative oriented game. So the books kind of work like this. This is just like the opening scene, I guess, for it's a story chapter. So it's a lot of reading and putting light on it. So stories are like that. Once we pass this, depending on how we do, we're going to go to the designated next spot. You see how it says do 2B, and that was if it's dark, you go to 2B. If it's bright, you go to 2A. So let's say we did a good job here. We'd end up on 2A. Give us a map and show us how to set it up. And then you got kind of an area for special rules. You get the flavor text that explains what's going on in Old English. Sometimes it's kind of tough to read. But then you've got some special rules over here. A very TLDR of the objective. And then the outcome tells you which page to go to next. I should have also mentioned at the bottom there's a stack. This is how many darkness cards you'll have. And that's effectively the timer for each scenario. So every turn you play one of these. And that's how many turns you have to accomplish the objective. Also, it also lists one of these discovery cards. These discovery cards add flavor text and also other rules and other things to the game. So it really adds, between right here and right here, it really adds a lot of dimension to the game. And it's been really interesting to see how they can change things around from story to story just by implementing the rules that they have. This base game came with enough adventures to probably play for, I don't know, it'd take a play group probably 6 or 7 months if they got together all the time to go through all the scenarios in here. It's quite a lot. And the big thing with this particular Kickstarter is that it came around, I guess, about a year later when they were going to be late. And a bunch of us were like, please just reopen the Pledge Manager because there's another, you could easily double the content and all the expansions that they offer. And that's when this game became the most expensive game I've ever purchased, still to this day. Because I went in and got everything. I don't know what came over me with this particular game. I really went for the hype on this one. So when you get this game, there's a little quick start guide. And it says there's 3 scenarios you can play. Well, ironically, one of them is an extra one that you'd have to buy. Now, that extra scenario wasn't very expensive at like $10. And it was free if you're an early backer, which I was. But it was odd that it was included in like one of the, this is a good training one to do. But they had 3, 2 were in here, 1 was the extra one. And they're 2 kind of shorter scenarios, sort of like a short, a medium, and then a long scenario to play. And I played through all of those. What's funny is my first couple of games, like I liked the game, okay. But I was a little disappointed on the lack of variety. Basically, you've got 2 kinds of scenarios. Well, there's like 3 kinds of scenarios, but there's one you almost never see, and that's like choose to do this or that. There's a couple of those mixed in, but mostly you're either putting light on, which involves no miniatures at all. It's just the book open, and you guys are trying to do stuff that generates light. So you're trying to illuminate Solomon Kane's path. And the other thing they have is a scene. And in a scene, you do have the boards out. You get the boards out, you get the miniatures on there. They'll present you with some special rules for interacting with the different miniatures. And through this whole thing, you'll be getting these discovery cards. Now, the discovery cards are specific for each scenario. And they're the tarot-sized cards. And they have they have numbers on the front. So as you go through the scenarios, it'll tell you to pull certain types of cards. And those cards can alter the rules. They can add things to it. They can take some things away. They can keep you from doing things. They can help you do other things. And those cards are kind of the magic dust that makes this game more worthwhile. Those cards really change the dynamic of each and every game that you play. Otherwise, would just be do the thing, gather light, do the scene, gather light, do the scene, gather light, do the scene. I mean, that is literally what all of these scenarios seem to be, from especially those first three. The discovery cards, though, they add other things that you can do, other ways to get light, for example, or things to accomplish when you're in these scenes, and how different ways to interact with people and different things that happen when you do interact with people. It's definitely the kind of game where, especially after those three scenarios, you get the hang of it, you get it, and you're ready to move on. Well, after I played those three, I was like, that was a lot of fun, even more fun, and as I went on, it was more and more entertaining. But I was still kind of like, wow, that really didn't seem like it seemed like it could get old after a while, doing the same sort of thing. And then we went into the next scenario beyond the basic one, so we got into La Ogre. We thought that sounded cool, so we decided to play that one next. And whereas the first three, the longer one wasn't super easy, but the other two were pretty easy. Basically, it wasn't very difficult to win. I definitely felt a little bit of a challenge, and it was still fun to play, especially because we were learning the rules, and it's easier if, they didn't hit you with everything all at once. When we got into La Ogre, I started to see a real challenge there. In my game group and we got all the way to the end and then just hopelessly failed. And it was the first time I'd ever lost a game of Solomon Kane, and I was like, oh, wow. They really amped up the difficulty. Now, there is dice involved, so there are times when you're just not going to have the currency to spend and use the cards the way you want to, but they definitely do step up the difficulty as you move up in the game. But I haven't sampled a lot of the other ones. I gotta say, based on what I've seen, especially from La Ogre, I'm very impressed with the way that they put this together. I had fun on the other games, but I did see that really they could take it in all these different directions, and I just think it's really clever the way they put it together. All right, so here's the Arsenal box. This has a little save pad. This is a little paper notebook pad where you can write down your stats and things that are going on here, and sort of bookmark where you're at in a particular scenario. This can be kind of useful, I think, especially in the longer scenarios. There are some of these that would probably take many, many hours to complete. There's some really thick books in that other box, so I imagine that this will be great for getting a quarter or 3/4 of the way through, writing everything down, just coming back to it later. This is the stat board that I was complaining about. It's really, really huge. It's double layered cardboard, so you can take your little marker and move it around in here, and that's nice. And it's well printed and really well made. Nice thick cardboard and stuff. In my opinion, this is too large. It just takes up too much space. I'd like to see something about like that size, especially when I've got a table full of miniatures and possibly a scene up and then a book out and all those other things that have to come out. This just seems really, really big to me. There's sort of a 5th player expansion for this. So instead of randomly having bad things happen to you with the darkness cards, you can use darkness as a character, a playable character, and then they kind of use those darkness cards that you'd randomly draw for bad things to happen. They can actually use that as a deck of cards and play them at will. And I imagine this is much more difficult. I have not played it yet. Pretty interesting though. This is what most of the dashboards look like for a virtue. There is a space here where your virtue can kind of sit there, and when they're on the board, you pull them off of here, and then you see you've got this special rule that happens when they're on the board. They have these same components as the cards. You lay your dice on here to achieve certain actions. You can donate dice between the different virtues, and there's little recessed spaces for that where the dice will kind of fit in there. It's kind of neat. And you can hold dice. If you don't need to use all the dice that you've rolled, or you don't want to use them, you can hold them for another turn in here. And and there's 4 of these virtue boards with all the different virtues: justice, courage, prudence, and temperance. and various other little cardboard things. All their little cardboard components have been really nice. Very thick, well-made cardboard. The whole rest of this box is miniature storage, and there's a lot of boxes of miniatures in here. Another big complaint I've seen is there's no guide for putting them back in. There's just clear plastic trays in here. And all of my miniatures are out because I've just painted them all. And I did photograph them before I took them out, so I'd have a reference, my own reference, for putting them back. But they did provide adequate storage for the miniatures, so you can put them away and store them in here safely. There's nothing that's too grabby, so if you paint it, it's not going to chip off the paint or anything. But it would have been nice to have a little bit of a guide for where they go. But there's plenty of room in here, and this holds miniatures from all the scenarios for the whole core box set of Solomon Kane. And as you can see, it's most of the box. This game is very miniatures heavy in that it has just a lot of different miniatures for all the different scenarios. Some that you use only once, and then some that you use a lot. So I have to say too that one of the other things I found really intriguing about this game is that it's not so simplified down to you see a monster, you battle a monster. You're not automatically fighting everyone that you come across. A lot of times you have to discover things or just talk to people and find out more. So it's not a hack and slash kind of game. It really does involve a little bit of critical thinking. There's a lot of luck with the dice and being able to do the cards that you need to do too, but at least it's not presenting things in a way that's just a constant battle over and over again. In fact, there are whole scenarios in here where Solomon Kane doesn't shoot anyone or doesn't draw his sword, or maybe he just barely does at the end and then it's suddenly over. So it's definitely not the typical hack and slash murder hobo type of dungeon crawler that you might see in some of the other games. So far there have been a number of scenes or scenarios that I've come to that have had some sort of confusing rules. There is a bit of interpretation that you have to do every time you turn the page, and that can get annoying, but I don't find myself in the rule books a whole lot. Now, I studied the rules pretty well, but normally, even if I do that, I'm thumbing through the rule book for some nuanced answer to a question. I didn't feel like I had to do that at all with Solomon Kane. Once you get it, you kind of get it. Now, what did happen is there are a couple of things that are written in a way that are a little bit more difficult to understand. And a lot of times it was just a trip to Game Board Geek to go look up a scenario or basically look up the card. Those discovery cards are all numbered. So if you have a question, you can kind of look it up. And if other people have questions, then it'll come out too. I have heard that there's an errata pack coming for this, similar to the Rightbusters errata pack that they sent out. So I guess there will be some corrections. To be honest, though, I haven't really gotten deep into all the scenarios here. So maybe there's a lot more mistakes, but I haven't run across a whole lot so far. Of course, in mine and many other people's opinion, I mean, this thing shouldn't have a whole lot of mistakes because it took a really long time to produce. That doesn't always mean anything, though. This thing is 3/4 text. There's text on the cards, there's text on every page, a lot of text. So getting something wrong here and there, especially with all that stuff to proofread, is not surprising. And so far, Mythic Games, I've got to hand it to them. They've been really good about recognizing if there was a problem and then resubmitting more actual printed material. Rightbusters had not only a new rule book, and I'm not saying it shouldn't have been right the first time, but they did make another rule book. They did improve the cards and change some things, and did some other things while they were at it to just make it a better game, and then send it out again. And of course, some of it did have mistakes also. But I think overall, I'm very happy and very relieved that this came out as such a nice game. It was an absolute joy to paint the different characters and stuff that are in this. And me and my buddies and my wife and my family, we've all had fun playing this game. We think it's really fun and definitely unique. It's definitely different than any other game that I have here in my pretty large collection. Another component that I got was the game mat. Many people were disappointed with this product because there was nothing printed on it to like help you play the game, like a place to put the cards and a place to do this, like you normally think of on some of these neoprene printed game mats. Now the mat itself was well made, but it's really just a very dark colored artwork with something similar to this. You know, not this artwork exactly, but I guess it's like the virtues and a real muted background. So I wasn't too disappointed with that because I thought it would be nice to have a game mat to kind of display, you know, mainly for making videos, something darker and kind of that I could put kind of anything on. My big complaint with it was well made. The artwork's fine. I think it would have been better. In fact, it would have been 100% better if they replaced some of the cardboard components from this that you use to track like Solomon Kane's stats. A real succinct, small version of that in the corner of this mat would have been great. It takes up a lot of space, especially if you have people. I mean, you got dashboards that are pretty decent size for each player. Each virtue has a dashboard. Then there's cards on either side of that. Then you've got this Solomon Kane stat board, which is enormous. It's like stupidly enormous. It takes up so much space on the table. If this game were a little bit more popular, I would expect there would be a dozen Etsy versions of this thing somewhere. Because it honestly could have been this big with some pegs or something like that. And I like the recessed board stuff. You know, the double layered cardboard where your thing kind of slides. You know, the little stat meter kind of slides around inside of there. I think all of that's really great, but it takes up so much table space. It's just kind of getting all the stuff on the game mat. Very cool, very creative game. It will probably cost you an arm and a leg if you try to get it now, but I did want to give you a review in case you were on the fence about it. Don't be scared. It is very expensive, and whether or not it's worth the price of that is sort of up to you, I guess. But this is the kind of thing I felt like I really shouldn't have backed at the time. Like, based on what I know now about Kickstarter, I don't know if I could have brought myself to get it, but there's something about this game. This character in particular was really, really interesting. They had one of the best Kickstarter videos, advertisement videos I've ever seen. It really drew me in immediately and made me want to get this game. So if you want to get this game anyway, this video is to push you over the fence, or you just never heard about it and you'd like to see more, you can still get this for a limited time from Mythic Games. I'm pretty sure they made some extras that they'll probably sell in their store, or if not, you'll be able to pick it up used online. It's a really, really huge set. The box that this came in was enormous. 35 pounds worth of games in this this core set. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a playthrough of this. Me and some of my fish keeping buddies, especially Chattanooga Ed and James from Fish Room Fever, we've been playing through a lot of these scenarios and had a great time doing it. So if you'd like to see a playthrough of this, let me know. I'd be happy to film one. Some of the games can be quite long, so I'm not sure. Maybe I can make an abbreviated playthrough and kind of skip some of the minutia of the different game elements. That's all for now. I've got another great game to tell you about, and I'm going to make a video for that very soon. That's coming up. But I'll be back soon. Enjoy your games, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye.
And snaggle teeth is stuff of tales to scare disobedient children. So this
Why would they scare the obedient children?
The disobedient, have a tolerance built up.
I'm not scared of him.
I'm not scared of him.
He'll eat you.